Alright, this is Jeremy Dower. I'm giving my final history presentation, or my pseudo-POL for Mr. Anderson, I guess. I'm going to be explaining 5 events and saying why they were pivotal. So the first event I have is when I took Taekwondo last summer. So this is a quote from my Life Moves Pretty Fast timeline. It says, "It was pivotal first of all because it taught me how to defend myself. Before Taekwondo, I would have been mostly helpless if I was attacked, but I think now I would at least have a fighting chance, literally. More importantly for me, Taekwondo was what finally got me into shape after many years of being borderline overweight. After taking Taekwondo for a few months, I was changed because I felt like I was in shape for once in my life." So, the reason this was pivotal is because, well, it's mainly because of all the exercise I got. Because, like, in elementary school, I was kind of like short and a little chubby. But then, oh, I was kind of like that from elementary through middle school. But then this was my sophomore year, actually. I started taking Taekwondo 2 times a week, and I really slimmed out. I got a little bit of muscle, and I felt like I was in shape, and it was pretty nice. And that was pretty pivotal for me. My historical pivotal event was the Columbine shooting. And the Columbine High School shooting was a school shooting in 1999. A pair of teenage shooters killed 12 students and 1 teacher. This was one of the deadliest massacres ever on American soil. This tragedy affected my generation because it alerted us to the disastrous effects of school shootings. And it also changed my generation because of the way we handle school security. After Columbine, every school developed emergency plans to deal with shooters and natural disasters. And this helps ensure my generation's safety. So for evidence, I actually have a picture I took from Mr. P's room. It is a plan for what to do if there's a natural disaster or a shooter in the school. It says, dial 911, run, hide, and fight. Now, the reason that we have this plan is because things in the past, like the Columbine High School shooting or like the Sandy Hook shooting, those are the reasons that we have these plans. So they affect my generation because we're safer now because of them. And if another event happens, we know what to do. We've been like forewarned. And that's how it affected my generation. And then my perfect storm historical event was Consequences of the Black Death. And it really wasn't Consequences of the Black Death, that was an event. The Black Death was the event. The Black Death swept through Europe around 1346. Yeah, and when it was in its prime, it killed almost 60% of the population of Europe. That's 6 out of 10 people dead. That's a lot of people. And because all these people in Europe were dying, there were a lot more opportunities for jobs because these men who had jobs died and people were needed to fulfill these jobs. So many of the younger and poorer men fulfilled these jobs because the alternative was to go to America and become an indentured servant, which is essentially a slave. So instead of becoming indentured servants, they had jobs in England, which means they don't go to America. And because the indentured servants were not going to America, the plantation owners needed a different kind of worker because there were no more indentured servants. So the plantation owners were forced to look at alternatives, such as black slaves. And this was one of the big reasons that North Americans switched to black chattel slavery. This is one of those pivotal things. And my American Revolution event was the Boston Massacre, which was in 1770. And in the Boston Massacre, British soldiers killed 5 American colonists and injured 6 others. And because the British soldiers killed the colonists, I mean, it was accidental, but the American people didn't think that. The American people didn't trust the British soldiers after this. Like, they never really liked the British soldiers, but especially after this, they couldn't trust them because they thought, well, the British just shot that guy. Why don't they shoot me? Like, we can't trust these soldiers. So this event, it made things very tense between the colonists as well as the soldiers, and they distrusted the British soldiers after that. My historical event which led to dissolution of the U.S. in 1861 was Uncle Tom's Cabin, written in 1852 by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Now, this novel was important, first of all, because it humanized slaves. It made the North realize that slaves were not just workers or animals, they were actually people, and they should be treated like that. The book depicts cruel slave owners and black slaves being mistreated and their families being torn apart, and the North realized that this is not a good thing and the slaves should be set free. And this book, as well as humanizing the slaves, it dehumanized slave owners because the book depicts them as these cruel, uncaring people who just abuse slaves. So the South didn't like the book because it depicts them in a poor way, and the North didn't like the book. Well, I mean, the North didn't like the South. I'm sorry. The South did not like the North after this book because the book was written by a Northerner and depicted the Southerners in an unfavorable way. And the North also didn't like the South after this book was written because it showed how cruel the Southerners were. So this book caused a lot of division between the North and South, and it was one of the pivotal events that led to the South seceding from the North. And that's my last event I have for you. I'm going to go upload this to Edmodo. Have a nice Christmas break.